Hello, students. I hope all of you are doing well. This is your mentor, Miss Vilika. Today we'll be discussing on the new chapter, that is chapter 9, under the history section, on the chapter Life in Towns and Villages. There are four main learning objectives that we will be learning from this chapter. The first one, to understand the reason for the second urbanization in the 6th century BCE. Second, to understand the implications of the widespread use of iron on agriculture. Third, to learn about the way of life in villages. Fourth, to understand the organization of the craftsmen and the merchants under guilds. So this is the four main learning objectives that we will be learning from this chapter. So let's begin with the class. In ancient India, urbanization was in tune with the agricultural economy, and the growing crafts and commerce promoted the prosperity of numerous towns, where the town was increased to many between 200 BCE and 250 CE, especially during the post-Mauryan period. Now let's learn the second urbanization. Here you have to remember that there are two urbanization. First, the first urbanization occurred during the Harappan culture around 2500 BCE, and the 6th century BCE in India is often referred to as the period of second urbanization, as we see a marked rise in the level of economic development. During the second urbanization, there was a rise of well-planned cities with mixed population comprising of craftsmen, traders, soldiers, and royal officials who needed all kinds of goods from food crops to luxury items. Many new towns like Pataliputra, Rajagriha, Vaishali, Mathura, and Kapilavastu emerged during this period. Here we see a great revolution in the villages, where new techniques in agriculture led to access of food grains. Here in this, king played a major role in the development of agriculture, trade, and city life, as they needed revenue to pay the salaries of the officials and maintain their standing armies. Next, the discovery of iron and its usage. The discovery of iron had a great role to play in the development and spread of civilization throughout the world. Iron was being used in India from about the first millennium BCE. Gradually, its use became extensive and was used to clear up the forest in the fertile Indo-Gangetic basin, leading to the creation of a food surplus and establishment of mighty emperors like the Mauryan Empire. The Mauryan were responsible for introduction of iron on a large scale in different parts of the subcontinents. It was done through the official called Loha Adhyaksha. I repeat, it was done through the official called Loha Adhyaksha. Let's learn how the agricultural system changed with the passage of time. So, as we all know, during the olden days, that is the ancient time, people to do the farming or the agriculture, it was really hard for them. Here, they had to dug up the ground using animals' bones and teeth and scattered wild grains and learned how to farm. But gradually, with the changes of time and with the passage of time, especially with the discovery of iron, the agricultural system changed. So, how did it change? With the use of iron hoes, sickles, and iron-tipped ploughs, agriculture expanded, leading to the production of food surplus for the people living in towns to thrive upon, which means with the discovery of all this, people started producing more and more food, more than what they needed, and they lived a wealthy life. More and more efforts were made to bring new areas under cultivation and develop new methods of irrigation. For irrigation and cultivation, earlier people had to depend on rain, but later canals, water tanks, wells, and artificial lakes were created to remove the farmers' dependency on rains. So these are some of the changes in agricultural system. Life in villages. We all know that there is quite differences between the people living in villages and the people those who are living in towns. So as we have seen that there were quite changes as the time passes. So even though this period saw the production of food surplus in ample quantities to feed an urban population, that is, even though there were loads and loads of foods to feed them in the urban population, yet social and economic differences were being seen in the villages. The Sangma literature mentions three classes of peasants in the Tamil Nadu region. These were the rich landlords. They were also called as vellalars. Next, the ordinary peasants. They were also called as uzavar. And finally, the third one, that is the landless laborers, they were called as adimai or kadasiar. In the north, the villages had a headman, which means the head of all the men in the village, and that headman is called the Gram Bujaga, who was the largest landowner, who had got the largest land of all, and his post was heredity in nature, which means whoever is the headman is capable of passing his post from parents to his or her offspring, that is, his or her children or brothers. Here, the headman collected the taxes on behalf of the state. He also looked into the disputes of the people. Dispute here it means disagreement or argument among the people, and the headman performed the duties of a policeman and a judge. Smaller landowners were called grihapatis. Here you have to remember the largest landowner were called the headman and the smaller landowners were called grihapatis. The smallest landlords they employ man and woman to work on their fields, and the last one, the landless laborers, were called the Dasa Karmakaras. So this is all about the life of the people who lived in the villages. Next is a rise of towns and cities. It is said that more than 60 towns and cities such as Pataliputra, Sravasti, Varanasi, Vaishali, Champa, Kaushambi and Ujjain developed between 600 BCE and 300 BCE. These cities became center of craft production, which means craft skills in making different objects by hands, and these were inhabited by a large number of artisans and merchants. The goods produced by artisans like textile, silk, jewelry, and pottery were carried by merchants to other towns. And slowly, iron was used in many ways, like they started using iron for making tools, weapons, and agricultural implements. Our next topic is guild system. So what is guild actually? When we say a guild is an association of artisans and merchants who oversee the practice of their craft, trade in a particular era. So, craft activities were also a major source of revenue to the state. Artisans living in towns had to pay taxes either in cash or kind or work free for the king. Some of the various craftsmen in the cities were potters, blacksmiths, weavers, goldsmiths, basket makers, etc. Traders and artisans were organized in associations which were called as shrenis or they were called as guilds. The guilds were very powerful and its association controlled the entire economic activity. The head of a guild was known as a jataka or pamukha. Next, trade. So, what is a trade? Trade is an act of buying and selling goods. Being a major source of revenue, trade and urban economy received great impetus. Great impetus here it means encouragement resulting in increasing activities under the Mauryas and influenced almost all parts of the empire. The inscriptions at Mathura refer to several categories of merchants, such as Vanik, who were called the general trader, Sartavaha, they were called as the leader of a caravan which transported goods over long distance, and Sati, they were known as a financier. The trade was conducted through land and river roads. Mathura was the transit point for travel to Ujjain and coastal areas of Gujarat also. The main center of trade in the northwest was Taxila, which was further connected with Central Asian markets. The external trade was also carried along the coast. The rise of two main empires, that is, Roman Empire in the west and Han Empire in the China, gave an impetus to external trade, which means the rise of this two main empire it encouraged in resulting and in increasing in more and more trades. Let's see some of the sources of information during the Mauryan and post-Mauryan period. A lot of information is available regarding the development of towns, trades, and craft in the Mauryan and post-Mauryan period, both literary and archaeological. Let us examine a few sources of information and see how life existed in towns and in the villages. The archaeological remains of monuments found at various places, it helps us to reconstruct the history of the period between 200 BCE to 300 CE. For instance, the ring wells and other artifacts facts found at Purana Killa reveal a lot of informations. Information about the period is also available in many foreign sources. The Periples of the Erythraean Sea, a Greek text written by an anonymous sailor in the 1st century CE, contains an account of the ports that he visited during his travel between the Red Sea and India. To conclude, let's quickly revise. First, emerging of the city was a result of two crucial processes. One was owing to the use of iron and mastering, the technique which enabled paddy transplantation. It helped the people of the Gangetic Valley to achieve greater mastery over the process of agricultural production. The other was the changes in the internal structure of the 6th century BC. This period saw the emerging of trading class, they gained in power and affluence. The place where the rich and powerful lived were the cities. Of course, the presence of these people meant the presence of a large number of poor people. This is why some scholars have said that the emergence of Buddhism was a response to urban misery. The ancient Indian literature describes cities of various kinds like Arikamedu, Pataliputra, and Ujjain. However, literature seems to exaggerate the size and opulence of the cities. Here, opulence it means great wealth and luxuriness. So, the literature that seems to exaggerate so much about the size and a great wealth of luxuriness during this period. So, this is all about the lives of towns and villages. To conclude, I want you to go through a thorough study of a case study about Arikamedu and Purana Kila, that is in page number 77 and page number 78. This is all about today's video. I hope you have learned something from this lesson. This is all for today. Thank you and stay safe.